Hey, welcome once again to Bleeding Edge Interviews. I am your host, Super Dave. Thank you very much for joining me. This is time for us to dig into the mind of one of those amazing artists out there making modern progressive rock that you might hear on places like, The Expanse on Live 365, my own little progressive rock channel. So when it comes to bands who do have a truly unique sound, one of those that stands out is Pure Reason Revolution. Now, they've actually been around for about 20 years, but they did take a 10-year hiatus along the way, so they maybe don't have as many albums as you might expect, but that's okay. They do pack a lot into the ones they do have, and especially since their return 4 years ago, they have been banging away with an eclectic mix of electronic-tinged progressive rock that really honestly sounds like no others out there. So I had the pleasure of sitting down to chat with multi-instrumentalist and founding member Jon Courtney about their latest effort, which is entitled Coming Up to Consciousness, and how it honestly reflects some very personal and difficult struggles he's experienced over the past several years, and what it's like for him to share those with the world, really. So without any further ado, let's get into my conversation with Jon Courtney of Pure Reason Revolution.
Well, thank you so much for joining me this morning. It's morning for me. It's afternoon for you. Appreciate your time, though.
No worries.
So how you feeling today?
Feeling good. Yeah, I didn't get much done this morning. We've just announced some UK shows. So, yeah, this morning it's been a slow morning. So I'm hoping this afternoon I can get down to some work.
Very good. Very good. So, big news, obviously. There is a new album coming out September 6th. Coming Up to Consciousness is going to be the album title. Very interesting reading the little sort of bio snippet about the album as it leads off with a series of mostly individual words, but just list them as betrayal, deception, fear, grief, mortality, and questions of sanity, which I often get into questions of sanity on a daily basis anymore. Described as deeply personal. So when I hear all of that, it almost sounds like the album may have been a potentially almost painful process recording it. And yet I hope and think it's entirely possible it was, in fact, cathartic. How would you describe it?
Yeah, it was definitely came from this place of pain. But then, by the end of the process, it was very cathartic for me to be able to get this down in music and lyrics. Was a really cathartic experience. And I'm very grateful that I have this outlet with music to be able to get this out of me. And it's sort of, if I rewind a bit, it goes back to when I had my dog put down in this August 2022. It was a 17-year-old dog. He was an old boy. And I really felt like I was prepared to take him to the vets. I felt like it was time. He was blind, deaf, couldn't walk so well, and all these things with old dogs. But it just hit me way harder emotionally than I was expecting. And brought up, some of these things you listed, these things of betrayal, taking him there. He didn't know where he was going. I deceived him. And then there was these, and then after this, sort of really brought this sort of sharp focus on death, mortality. And I was sort of even had concerns about my family at the time, about their health and things like this. And then just as I was starting to feel sort of slightly better, maybe 6 to 8 weeks. And let's say 8 to 12 weeks after this, I then had this possible asbestos exposure. And then this really flipped me over the edge, because this was really if I had to put a biggest life fear, this was up there. And then this again brought this mortality, death thing. I was worried that my family could have been exposed. It was all my fault. And then very quickly, I was, at the doctors, psychologist, psychiatrist. And then I had this OCD diagnosis. And then, sorry, I'm giving you a long background here. And then around this time, I wasn't inspired. So I sort of was taking it easy on myself, and I just spent some time trying to improve guitar, trying to improve my piano theory and playing. But this wasn't really creative. Yeah, technically I was improving a little bit.
Right.
And then I met my friend Craig, who was the singer in this band Archive, and Power of Dreams. He's an Irish guy, lived in Berlin. And he said, I met him and talked about these few months. And he was like, John, you've got an album here of lyrics. Like the stuff you've just told me, you need to get it down. Like, even if you're not inspired musically, get this stuff down lyrically. Yeah. And I thought, okay, yeah, I guess he's got a point here. So then I did start writing stuff down. And then around this time also, I thought, forget doing this, improving my guitar skills and piano knowledge. And I just thought, I'm just going to, I'm just writing. Like, let's get this going. And then then the album came out super quickly. Like, in a matter of weeks, I'd written the songs, and it was super quick. Wow. So after this kind of creative block, this sort of healing period, it then just came out.
Yeah. Wow. That's a lot of stuff. And it's all, I think, for me in many ways, very interesting. One, let me say, I'm sorry to hear about your dog. I think too many people underestimate the impact of losing a pet and how important they can be to an individual or a family. It's every bit as much as losing a family member, really. I mean, most people tell you that is a family member. So, I know how impactful that can be. In fact, my girlfriend and I have been through it twice in the last couple of years. One cat was very old and had cancer and eventually needed to be, euthanized. Then the other one, who wasn't much younger than him, just suddenly died one day. And, so we've been through it a couple of times, and I think a lot of people underestimate it. And it's interesting how you processed it, I think, in some ways too, because it's like, I think about the fact that you dug into intellectual pursuits to an extent, or mechanical, physical pursuits in working on your piano playing and your skill sets. Interesting in the sense that maybe that was your way of keeping yourself from digging too deep into the emotional end of things until your friend said, well, wait a minute. And you went, oh, because I'm sitting there thinking the same thing, like, wow, all this that happened to you was so much a pull for creativity. And yet, as a musician, you went a different direction at first. So maybe you were kind of avoiding a little bit for a while.
Yeah, I think so. I think I was avoiding it, and it just still sort of processing it and getting through it. And then came the time, like I said, after this thing with Craig, it was just like, okay, right, now it's time. Yeah. Now let's get it out. And then it was like a flood. It was super quick.
Yeah. When you were ready, it was all there. And so it's amazing. So I guess for you then, it was served a couple of purposes. One, it was processing and sharing what you experienced to an extent, or your feelings more likely about what you experienced, and perhaps things you learned about life along the way. But I'm also curious that in the process of writing, was there maybe additional discovery, more insights that you learned as you were doing that process?
That's really closely. I think when I talk about this album, sometimes it feels like it sounds depressing when I talk about the initial things that led to the inspiration behind it and the background. But I hope that with listening to the album, it's not all depressing, because by the time I got to the end of it, it was a very healing and cathartic process. Yeah. And I hope that in the music, you get a sense of hope. You get a sense that there is a bright future, that the present is bright as well. And for me, it was a huge learning experience. Yeah, I learned a lot about myself, and I can now look back on this whole horrible time and think that it was a great period for growth. I grew a lot during this time, learned a lot about myself, And yeah, to all the things that happened, I can take it as a positive. Now I can take it as a positive. At the time, of course, it was torturous, but now it's like, okay, great, I'm out the other side of it. Yeah. Did that answer the question?
I think so. I would certainly say if it was healing for you, then I would imagine then for the listener that will come through as well. I've been listening to it, and to me, it is that undefinable for me quality of a Pure Reason Revolution album, where we'll get to that.
Yeah.
I find you guys indescribable or uncategorizable, but I don't feel down to listen to it. Admittedly, I don't have all the lyrics in front of me or haven't had the chance to absorb even the ones I do have. But to me, it's there's always this sense of uplift that goes with it. But also, I so enjoy the shifts of mood and texture that come along with the songs and such. But it makes me wonder too, when you're putting all that out there as you're doing, and for a lot of artists, they're doing the same thing. And you're putting all of that out there for basically public consumption, so to speak. What's that like for you? Is that a little scary at times? I mean, I think it takes a certain amount of bravery to do it, but I wonder if that's just natural for you as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's, one does feel quite vulnerable when you're sort of putting this out there and, telling people about the backstory. Yeah. But I think I can't do it any other way. This happened, this inspired me. So let's share it, because then that's authentic. This is, if I didn't talk about the backstory, then I don't know what you and I would be talking about now. So it's necessary for people to hear, I think. But yes, I do sometimes think, it's a bit scary getting out there. But I also hope that people can relate to it. Yeah. And already people have messaged in, because they're aware of the themes that went into it, and I've heard about other people losing pets. And, they seem to be getting some, it's some, not relief from it. I don't know what the word is, but they can connect to it. And, if our music can help people in any way, just a tiny percentage to get them through the day, through the week or whatever, that's just an incredible, that's incredible for the writer. To hear this is enough to keep me going for the next few years. If it can help anyone with any sort of mental health issues, or any negative mental state, if it can help pull them through, then we've done our job, amazing.
Yeah, I think you'll be surprised at how many people you reach because of the subject matter. Because again, it's often overlooked how important pets are. And so I think at times people may question their own reactions to that loss, and to have the sense of commonality with someone else who's gone through or is going through the same thing, and that validation that comes with it. You might be surprised how many people you can reach that way, because they oftentimes, I think, may just feel that they aren't allowed to grieve that way for a pet. So, I think in that sense, there's a lot of value there. When you're writing personal music to this level, though, I often wonder, like, do you at times find yourself having to fight back your own emotional reaction when playing it live?
I thought about this on a couple of, in the past. Yeah, I think it will come up at certain points in song. With You Now, we had this, a lot of it was about the premature birth of my daughter. So, yeah, a couple of times in a few songs I have this feeling. And I think with this record, there's been a couple of moments. There's a few lyrical sections where I think, like, live, this could be a bit difficult to sing. But let's see when I get there. But I have already clocked this and thought, let's see what happens here.
Yeah. Like, I've never thought to ask anybody that question before, but it's one of those things where I think, when I may be listening to somebody else's music and, I have an emotional reaction and I can feel that maybe choking up or something like that at certain passages. And I go, how do they do this on the stage?
Yeah. So let's see what happens. I'll have to let you know in 6 months or so what happens here. But...
Yeah. I suppose there's probably somewhat the benefit of, all the practice, I imagine, that will occur between now and then that might help to, kind of get you a little desensitized to it.
Yeah, I was just thinking that, after several days in the rehearsal room, going over the stuff, I think, that would be sensitized. But it's a different thing, isn't it? I suppose in the rehearsal room, you are just there and it's repetition. Live, it takes on a new thing because you've got the audience there. So it's the push and pull between the artist and the audience and seeing their faces, seeing their emotion. That's probably what could push me over the edge.
I hadn't considered that part too. I can imagine that there is definitely that. I've had a few experiences there where emotionally you could tell a band and the audience were just in sync. It just heightens the whole thing.
Yeah,
it's amazing. So getting back to describing your music, Pure Reason Revolution's music, it strikes a chord with me. I think that I've always enjoyed what you guys have been doing because it's unique. It's very unique in sound and style. Nobody else I can think of that I would go, oh yeah, they sound just like this.
Yeah.
And I find it really difficult to exactly categorize, easily at least anyway. So if you're talking to somebody who didn't already have a familiarity with you guys, how would you describe it?
I would probably go straight in and say that it's in this progressive rock genre.
Yeah.
And then I would list a few bands. Who do I normally list? I would say, so let's say Pink Floyd, Smashing Pumpkins. Then I'd say vocal harmony wise, think Beach Boys, Fleetwood Mac. And then I'd probably start seeing some confused faces. Well, but then, there's an electronic influence in there as well. So, and that could be, back to an artist like DJ Shadow through to something like, I don't know, Kraftwerk or even, Justice that we had a few years ago that came out of France. So there's an electronic influence, definitely.
Yeah. You caught me by surprise with Fleetwood Mac. That's one I had not even considered. Floyd, yes. Okay, I can definitely hear that little bit of influence there. Speaking of people putting their lives on paper for everybody to see, and here I've thought of that as you were talking about it. I thought, well, if you ever questioning yourself, just look at Roger Waters. He's not shy about it.
No, that's it. No.
So, excellent. All right. So, and that makes me wonder too. Like, I know there was collaboration between you and Greg in the course of writing this album.
Yeah. And
I'm curious how that works between the two of you guys and where we might hear that most on the album.
Yes, I'm trying to think. So I made it over to Greg for a session. I think it's sort of midway through. Yeah, I usually go and see Greg. Usually after there's a few ideas down, then I'll go to Greg. And sometimes we work on those ideas, and sometimes we just work on something completely fresh. I think generally, we prefer to work on something completely fresh. So let me have a look. Let me look at the track. Give me work on. Hold on, wow. So we worked on, the main ones we worked on together were Betrayal we worked on. That was definitely one that we did in Portland. What else? We worked on Bend the Earth, and we worked on Lifeless Creature. These were the main ones. I think we started on those from scratch and put them. Yeah. And then the rest I'd made a start on here, and then we did a few bits together. But these were the main sort of co-written songs. Yeah, and we just sit then, Greg could be at the piano, I can be on guitar, and we just have a really comfortable relationship. We can, because we've worked together so long, our references are really close, so we can say, oh, this guitar sounds a bit too nice, make it sound a bit more Radiohead or something like this, or like, let's get the slide out, let's try something that sounds a bit like Gilmore, but mess it up a bit or something. So, yeah, very close references.
Yeah. It's good to have that longer term working relationship where you've got that shorthand you can just go back to as far as language and communicate really easily and put that out there. Gotcha. So, all right. So that's interesting when you talk about you two working on music and then somewhere along the line, you've got to, I guess, figure out how to fit the lyrics in with what the two of you came up with. Or do you do it the other way around? You start with the lyrics and go, here's our mood, let's start working from that.
I think with Greg, usually I think on these tracks, we'll start a bit of music and then straight away I'm scribbling things down. So just not really, these aren't probably going to be the keeper lyrics, but these are just melody ideas. Because then Greg will come up with some melody idea too, and he might just be singing like da 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 da. Like it doesn't have to be lyrics at this moment. It's mainly let's get the melodies, let's get something passable for the different sections. Yeah. And then after I've been with Greg, that's when I'll come back to Berlin and then focusing, then sort of, start chipping away at the lyrics a bit more and forming more of a concept and lyrical theme.
Notice one thing that a little bit different this time around is that overall, on average, the songs are a little more concise than has been typical on previous albums. So I'm curious, how much of that was a conscious decision?
I think there were a couple of things that were a conscious decision on this record, and it was mainly I wanted to move away from sort of my favorite chords. So I dusted off my old jazz guitar book, and for a few songs, this was useful for literally just introducing a new chord or two. I would look in there and go, okay, that's, find this position. And then think, well, I would never have come up with this, off the top of my head. And then but just this one chord would be enough to kickstart a whole track. So maybe 2 or 3 times, maybe more. This was super helpful. So I wanted to try and avoid my usual sort of tonal palette, if you like. So there was a conscious decision to search out some new harmony, basically. And another thing was a bit to avoid sort of mine or our sort of usual PRR tricks. Of course, you get this light and shade, this heavy, this quiet, this beautiful, then dark stuff. But I just wanted to change that up a little bit. So some of the songs stay down, and that's fine. Some of the songs, are rocking as well. But if the song wanted to stay small, then that was fine too. Not everything had to sound like the end of the world was coming. And around this time I was listening to a lot. I was listening to Spirit of Eden pretty much on repeat. I was listening to the Smile album by 2 of the guys from Radiohead, listening to a lot of Elliott Smith, along with all the other stuff I listened to. Yeah. But again, this sort of had an influence on a bit more of a laid back thing. And who knows, the next album might be all guns blazing again. But this one can have some chilled out tracks. So I guess the main thing was trying to avoid some of the PRR cliches or tricks, usual tricks, and also changing things around harmonically.
Right. Gotcha.
So,
Yeah.
but with regards to the length of songs, I don't know. That wasn't sort of mega planned out, you know. Yeah, it just happened how it happened.
Yeah. Just where inspiration took you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm not surprised that was the mindset you guys approached this album with, because I remember thinking as I was listening to it, I'm like, wow, yeah, this does seem a little slightly more on their mellow side emphasized than previous stuff. And I'm like, there's, I haven't really heard too much of those huge chugging passages. And then worship came on. I went, okay, there it is. There it is.
Yeah, exactly. There you go. So you still get them, but maybe not quite in the volume of other records. And that's, well, the other records have them. I mean, sometimes I listen to something like Ghosts and Typhoons and I think, I don't know if I can do better than this. Well, it's kind of like, well, let's just try something different,
Sure.
and unique in its own way. And yeah.
That is a difficult song to top. That's signature PRR right there.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, it's I'm finding it a very enjoyable listen up to this point, certainly, as I've dug through about 3 times now. And there is definitely some subtle differences throughout, both in, like we're talking about, the sense of it being a little more mellow, the sense of it being more concise, but also for me, and I think it took a little bit to figure out what seemed a bit different. And I think a lot of, too, what I was hearing was some subtle shifting as far as the rhythm section, I guess what I would say, how the bass and the drums were approaching it.
Yeah.
And I understand maybe some of that might be related to some shifts in personnel involved in this album.
Yeah. I mean, with the drums, I'm trying to think, the Yugner and Bob Cyrus, I would program stuff in Logic. So I'd program drums around, or sometimes Greg would play something.
Yeah.
And then we worked with Jeff Dugmore. We did a couple of studio sessions with him, and he would just, like improve on what we'd done, do it on his big bombastic kit, and do his amazing Jeff Dugmore thing. But with this record, I mean, I continued programming stuff as I do in Logic. But then Ravi had been touring with us for the last couple of tours, and was always super enthusiastic about trying some recording. So the opportunity came up, and I sent him the Logic stuff, and he said, well, yeah, I'd love to do my thing on top of that. So then he did his stuff. So I guess, you get a new flair from Ravi being involved on drums. Bass-wise, yes, we have Guy Pratt on this record. And this was really amazing to hear what he did, because, on the previous Pure Reason records, I'd done the bass. Greg had done a bit of bass too. But for me, bass is sort of an afterthought. It's not my thing. So when you give a track to someone like Guy Pratt, it's amazing to hear what they do, because this is someone who, it's their thing. Like, and he's the top of his level on this, whether it's playing on Floyd or whether it was doing the session on Like a Prayer, Madonna, he knows what he's doing. So it was really exciting to get the stuff back from him, with a real bass player playing the part. So yeah, that's definitely a difference from.
Yeah, I don't know how I would describe it, but there's like this extra little bit of bounce.
Yes,
it's about the best term I could think of. That just felt little extra, I don't know, tweaks, syncopation, something that goes on there that just he puts in there that it doesn't smack you in the face.
No, but
then on listening, like, there's something a little different this time around, and I'm really enjoying it. So yeah, I seems you chose well in bringing him in.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a really really good experience doing it with him. I wanted to get him to Berlin, but he ended up recording with Dave Gilmour, so then that didn't work out. So we did it remotely. And that worked really well. But, if we work again, I would like to think he could come to Berlin. And, doing the remote thing is always a second choice. It's always first choice to be in the room with the musicians, to have this, the sparks coming from creativity, like together, and getting excited in that moment. But, doing the remote thing also worked.
Yeah. It certainly worked on this occasion.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And then that's not the only personnel shift that occurred with this album as well, which the other one to me was virtually seamless. If I wasn't reading, I don't know that I would have picked up on it immediately. Okay. And that being what? Chloe not available, so you brought in, I'm going to see if I can pronounce it correctly, Annika Shireen?
Yeah, exactly, yeah. Yeah, I mean, Chloe and I talked. I'd begun some demos on this record, and it was coming up to the time of vocals, and Chloe and I spoke, and she's super busy with her day job. She also plays in this band, James, and, she said, I could sing on the record, but I won't be able to do any live shows. And it just got me thinking, is this more confusing if Chloe does this, like with Above Cirrus, sings on the record but can't do it live? Is this more confusing for the fan, for the listener? Annika has now done a couple of tours. We get on well. She's available for shows. So, Chloe and I chatted a bit more, and we just thought, it makes sense to sit out this record. Mm-hmm. The door's always opened. And Chloe and I remained good friends. I went to go and see James when I was back in the UK, and she put me on the guest list. And, the door's always open, but just the circumstances right now don't work out. And Annika's fantastic. Love working with Annika. So who knows what happens? That it's sort of, we need the band. I want the band. We want the band to go forward. So this is the only way we can do it.
Yeah,
so that's how we do it.
Yeah, it makes sense. It also seems to be one of those products of the modern progressive music world anyway, where so many people have so many different things happening at once, which, as you noted, often sort of forces the remote recording rather than together in the studio and the remote composition process. And here's a product of it, is that you find that people have so many projects that touring consistently with all of their projects isn't a thing that can happen. So sometimes there are bands out there that don't really tour, but they are continually recording. And in this case, if you want to do both, somewhere along the line, something's got to give.
Yeah, exactly. And who knows in the future, maybe one day we'll have Chloe and Annika on stage and have, extra harmonies, and that would be fantastic. So, yeah.
That would be. I like the thought of that, because I love the vocal harmonies that's part of that unique PRR sound that I have so enjoyed. So, yeah. Okay. Very interesting to hear. So that also, I was going to ask, I lost train of thought for a moment there. It happens when you get old. So you had some pretty big name there helping you with the production, Bruce Sword of The Pineapple Thief. How was that experience for you? Was that, I'm not sure, was that the first time you worked with him, or did you work with him before?
No, this is the first time.
Yeah.
Well, I think a couple of names came up for mixing, midway through the record. Because for me, I've been so involved in the songwriting and the production that I really want to hand it over to someone by the end. I'm too close to it. So Bruce came up, and then I think Bruce tried a test mix, and that came out really, really well. So we just said, great, let's do the record together. Yeah, I had a really lovely experience, really good working relationship. And Bruce said, very early on, working on this is so natural for me, Jon, because, he's also in this genre. Mm-hmm. So he could just feel it straight away. Do you know what I mean? He could. Also, he contributed some some bits, some guitar bits in places. Yeah, and it was just really useful to have him to also bounce ideas off as well in the process. So, yeah, the relationship was fantastic with the mixing. I really hope we will work again together in the future.
Nice, yeah. It's always kind of fun when you see those, those well-known names popping up in that type of role. And agreed, I think at times it's nice to have that producer who can pop in and add a few things, add a few ideas, push you to stretch yourselves. And I've seen it at work in times as well. Classic example would be, Rush when they got together with Nick Raskulinowicz, whatever the heck his name is. I never can remember it, but how he really helped kind of rejuvenate them, especially in those last couple of albums, by pushing them in directions they hadn't gone for a while. And there are times I see bands that have long-term been self-producing things. And at a certain point you go, they feel like they're stagnating a little bit. Maybe putting somebody else in the mix to bring some other ideas, some fresh perspectives, and push them into areas that they are less comfortable might, bring some rejuvenation back to them. I'm not naming any names. They might know who they are if they hear this.
No, that's a really good point. And I think, it was possible that we would work with Daniel Bergstrand for mixing again. And maybe it's because, we were used to that. It worked well with Daniel before, so let's do that again. But, I'm so pleased that we sort of moved, and I'm sure it would have been great had he done it. I'm very pleased that, we found this new relationship. That was, like I said, super enjoyable and fantastic result. And sort of not only did Bruce sonically and technically make it sound fantastic, he also contributed musically, which I loved as well. He did a few things and it was like, yep, straight away, that's great. That's a keeper. And we were, like working with Greg, we were sort of on the same page very quickly.
Yeah. So meanwhile, for those of us that are hoping to see you play live somewhere, I know I saw a few dates coming up. I'm curious about any additional extended tours that might be in the works. Anything you can talk about at this point?
I don't. At the moment, we've just got a couple of European festivals, and then we've got some extra dates on the back of that in Germany, Netherlands, and France. We've just announced a few UK shows. Then next year, we've got this Cruise to the Edge. Have you ever been on this, Steve?
I have not, and it's a bucket list item for me. It came up, and I was almost going to do it this year because I looked at the lineup, and there's so many artists there I wanted to see, you guys included especially. And then I had to choose between that and Marillion Weekend. And I went, really want to do Cruise to the Edge, but coming so close to another trip we've got planned, it might get a little expensive for me to do. And I don't know how many more Marillion Weekends we get. I mean, I like not to sound doom and gloom, but I mean, they're not spring chickens anymore. So realistically, after this, it's another 2 years I got to wait. And I'm like, you know what? We're going to do that first.
Yeah.
And then I'll look for Cruise to the Edge the following year.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And the Marillion Weekends are brilliant. He played with back 2022. I think it was 2022. I think it was.
Yeah.
It's really. I'm not sure, but we had the honor during one of the support nights, so that was fantastic.
For the record, I'm taking credit for that, by the way, because I think I saw at one point in time on the message boards with their stuff, and I suggested you guys.
Oh, wow.
And when it was announced that you were going to be playing there, I went, that's me. I'm taking credit. It's all me.
Okay, you can have that one. But it was a great show. But I think, we've got this Cruise to the Edge, but we would love to do a more substantial tour in the US and Canada as well.
That would be excellent.
Would be really good and long overdue. So it's just finding the right package. Yeah, finding the right right band for us to go out with, I think. But it will happen.
Yeah. Excellent. Yeah, I look forward to that. And enjoy Cruise to the Edge. That's jam-packed show going on at that point in time. I'm sorry that I couldn't do both, but that's an absolute banging cruise right about there with everybody they've got on there.
Yeah, no, I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah. Well, Jon, I've really been great talking to you today. I appreciate it. I appreciate all your insights and you sharing everything that you've done. I know that I expect this won't be the last interview you do, so you'll be sharing all that personal stuff over and over again. Appreciate your openness to talk about all of it. It's very kind of you.
Pleasure, and likewise.
Excellent.
Thank you very much. Yeah, no, really good.
Yeah, I wish you guys the best with the album. So far from me, I'm just going to say now it is one of my album of the year contenders already. I expect the reception to be warm from the critics and the fans. So, and I hope it takes off. I hope it really does well for you guys, and the tour get a big one. You get lined up with somebody nice, and we all get to see you.
Yes, that would be fantastic. We'll let you know when that's happening.
Excellent.
All right.
So take care. Have a good rest of your day.
You too. See you. Bye.
There you have it. Jon Courtney wearing his emotions on his sleeve and turning them into some amazing music. So once again, Jon, I want to thank you for joining me and being so open about everything. I really appreciate it, man. It's not an easy thing to do, I know. So kudos to you and the band on a really, really impressive album. Once again, for those that want to chase it down, it's called Coming Up to Consciousness, and it's due out September 6th. Pre-orders should be beginning pretty soon, I would imagine. And Jon, you and the rest of the band, I wish you the best with this album. I really hope it's every bit as successful as it deserves to be, because it's a really fine effort. For the rest of you joining us, I want to thank you for your time. Appreciate you coming along for the ride. Check out my social media links and the link to The Expanse. They're in the description. Got a link to the band's webpage in the description as well. Just keep it coming, folks. I'm glad to have you here with us. So that's all I have for you now. And remember, never fear to deviate from the norm. Keep it froggy. And this is Super Dave, signing off.